Hey everyone, we have a special episode of What's New in Data today to kick off season 3. I wanted to highlight a really great event coming up called the Low Key Data Conference, sponsored and led by Portable.io and their CEO, Ethan Aaron, who's with me today. Ethan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Always great to catch up. I love these conversations, John, as always.
Oh yeah. You're a frequent guest on What's New in Data. We love having you and your spicy takes on data. Tell us a bit about your conference that's coming up.
Totally. So if you think about the conference and event landscape throughout the year for data people, there's big events. There's like Snowflake Summit, or DBT Coalesce, and they have different tilts. Like maybe one's slightly more vendor, maybe one's more analyst. One of the things that I just realized is missing is a recurring cadence for people to just get up to speed on what's actually going on. And like there's LinkedIn if you want just like tidbits of information throughout a week or throughout the day. There is podcasts from you, from Joe Reese, from others that are more like on a weekly basis, kind of deep dive with one person. The gap that we're filling is so like great. If you just want to know, if you want to sit down for 4 hours, listen to 20 speakers, the top venture investors in the data world, the biggest, spiciest influencers out there in the data world, the heads of data at GitLab or Saks Fifth Avenue or Lacework. You should just have one place, one day to go or watch the recordings afterwards and just get up to speed and be like, great, I understand what's going on for the next year, for the next quarter. That's the goal. The whole thing's 4 hours. It's entirely virtual. It's going to be jammed. My job is going to be make sure we can get content out of 20 speakers in 4 hours, but it'll be nonstop.
Yeah, definitely a who's who of people in data showing up and sharing their expert insights at your event. So we're all super excited for it. For the listeners, the link to the event sign up is in the description. But to really kick this off, Ethan and I are going to go through a few hot topics in data right now. And we're just going to get each other's perspectives on there. We're just going to go in order. How's that sound, Ethan?
Let's do it.
Cool. So the first question, everyone's talking about the macro, everyone's talking about the economy, and really how that's going to tie back to the data landscape. So I wanted to get your perspective. What's the job market for data going to look like as the macro headwinds increase a bit?
Totally. So when I think about both the people I'm talking to, the conversations I'm having, the things that are top of mind for even like whether it's our customers, our prospects, anyone, it is not their data stack. It is not the cost optimization. It is either their existing job or the next job they're trying to get. We're already seeing layoffs take place across the board in big tech and small tech and in startup land in enterprise world. And it's heavily impacting the data world, which sucks. There's a lot of phenomenal talent that it's not their fault, but they're looking for new jobs at this point. There's also people in existing jobs looking for new jobs because they know they start to understand the financial situation of their business, or they just want to change. So to me, when I think about everything going on in the data world right now, this is by far the most important thing to the industry and to the ecosystem. Unfortunately, what I think is happening right now, we are seeing layoffs. We're seeing a lot of people move. I think consulting firms are picking up more both demand and also supply of talent in the ecosystem. We're seeing an interesting shift where people in the data world, it's not as much of like, oh, what's the adjacent role I can have, as much as should they start their own consulting firm? Should they go work part-time for 3 companies instead of full-time for 1? I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things to see this year is how many of these people go back into the traditional workforce as a analytics engineer or data analyst, and how many people just say, I'm going to do this myself and go sign up some smaller roles that add up to more money. So that's my take on the job market right now. What are you thinking? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, it's always sad to see layoffs and jobs be impacted, because ultimately we know that there's a lot of talented people working on data. One thing I will say is that it might be a tale of two cities, so to speak, because on the other hand, I do see huge tailwinds and growth in enterprise digital transformation I see teams actually doubling down and growing there on the enterprise side, because we are in a very I would call deployment phase of cloud analytics at the enterprise tier. And ultimately, a lot of budget has already been allocated to transforming enterprises to be data driven, cloud first, ergonomic. So, it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe it's kind of a, you know, uh, we're seeing more investments into certain areas, and data engineers have to figure out how to align themselves in the industries where data is becoming a big focal point for
Totally.
growth. Yeah.
Totally. Yep. 100%.
And that just comes to our next point, which is as a data engineer, as a data practitioner, the key is being in the right place at the right time and bringing value. So, like, how do you differentiate yourself as an employee, or even as a consulting shop, maybe even a company or a group within a company? Just the key question here is, how do you stand out and show that your unique value?
Totally. Back to the first point of what's happening in the job market, I don't view it as demand. I don't view it as demand for data talent is decreasing. Demand globally across the board is increasing.
Yeah.
It's a reallocation. And my take is tech is the same way. Sure, Google does not have as many employees as they did before, but there's a ton of phenomenal talent that's being reallocated and going to lead engineering functions and other business functions at tons of super cool medium to long tail companies.
Yes.
So that's the macro point. In that world, though, you want to be you have to be selfish. You have to think about what's best for you as a person, or you as a company, or you as a consulting firm. And a lot of it, part of it's skills. And I know this is part of it's hard skills. Like, do you know SQL? Can you deploy infrastructure? Can you use the tools at play? But another part that I think a lot of people in the data world overlook is, how do you get in front of people? How do you differentiate? How do you actually stand out in a really tough market where there are a lot of other people also saying, hey, I want to be the next head of data at your company? How do you stand out? My few recommendations there. Number one is find a way, pick the skills that you want to show off. Maybe it's great, I'm great at standing up data technologies. And instead of going and putting it in bullet 3 of a resume, I would think about LinkedIn, put it on LinkedIn, make it front and center, put it in the header of your profile. Because for me, whenever I am interviewing people, I don't just look at their resume, I look at their LinkedIn profile as well. So that's number one. Number two, videos kill it right now. Sending someone a resume versus sending them a 10-minute overview of you standing up an entire data stack, or you actually walking through a pipeline or a custom script that you built, you can reuse it. You can send it to 10 different people. It's a better version of a cover letter in 2023. So that's number two. And then number three is, if you're not a podcast person, don't start a podcast. If you're not a LinkedIn person, don't start LinkedIn. But find somewhere where you can start engaging with the community. Maybe it's Reddit, maybe it's Quora, maybe it's somewhere else, and start becoming more vocal. Because that brand, when you think about, when I see someone on LinkedIn saying I'm looking for a job, if I've never seen them on LinkedIn before, I want to help. I will take meetings with anyone looking for a role in data right now. Ping me on LinkedIn, happy to grab time. But if I see someone who I also recognize from their content every day, it's I feel like I know this person. So starting to build that ongoing brand and awareness is also really important. So it's really just of the three, my biggest recommendation though is create a 10-minute video, create a 5-minute video. It's just this is how I can add value. This is me showing you that I can communicate about it, that I can do the things that I tell you I'm doing, and use that as your cover letter. It's a lot simpler, and it makes you stand out. What's good?
Yeah, incredible advice, Ethan. So, and to your point, not everyone, just wants to make a LinkedIn. Not everyone wants to make, whatever that next popular social media outlet is, but everyone can find something that's right for them. So it might be maintaining a GitHub repo. It might be contributing to other popular open source projects that already have thousands of stars, and you're opening up pull requests or opening up issues and starting to build credibility within the community that way. And then I love the idea of just, making a video as the modern cover letter to just show hey, I can communicate the value of what I'm working on, because ultimately when you are working for a data engineering team, that data engineering team, on top of building pipelines and maintaining them to consumers and all that technical work, is at the same time advocating for their role by talking about the ROI that they're
Totally.
bringing to the business, right? So that's always going on in parallel. So having another person on your team who's good at that sort of communication, good at building that case for themselves for what they're working on, that's just a very invaluable skill. So yeah, I think incredible advice from your end, Ethan.
Sweet. So I'll take question 3 at this point. You brought it up. There's data producers, there's data consumers. There's a lot of talk in the market around data contracts and kind of how these people should interplay with each other. The pros, the cons. Is it the right interface? Whose fault is it? Is it someone's fault? What's your take on data contracts right now?
I think data contracts are already everywhere. They're just very implicit. So, people aren't calling them data contracts. They aren't, reading all the pop. I mean, some people are reading the popular blogs on the topic. Chad Sanderson's done some incredible work there, and Ethan, your takes on it are also very widely covered. But I see lots of enterprises, lots of data teams, doing some form of data contract management, having SLAs to business consumers. It's just a little implicit, right? It's, hey, I'm getting escalations right now that, our data is not being delivered in this format within an X minute SLA, right? But that SLA isn't codified. It's not reified in the pipelines and the warehouse. So I think it is actually something for teams to look at, to actually start building internal collateral specs, code that talks about the specific data contract.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the next big question that we get are, should producers or consumers make the contract?
So my take on this is a fewfold. So if you think about the problem a data contract is solving, in a nutshell, it's teamwork. Like if you think about a data contract as an internal thing, there's external data contracts, which are typically either they're APIs in some capacity, whether it's a REST API, an S3 fold, like some interface for people to interface with. Inside of a company, I think a lot of interfaces fall under the bucket of teamwork. It all comes down to how do you work together as a small team or as a really big team or an organization. So in that world, I don't think it's one person or the other's job to solve the problem. It's not the producer's job to perfectly maintain things. It's not the consumer's job to perfectly maintain things. Just like in any relationship. With a co-founder, same thing. If I was just like, hey, Azim, it's your job to make sure that we talk correctly and that we interface correctly, that's ridiculous. If my job was the same thing, it'd be ridiculous. Like it's really in service of teamwork and a vision. So I think data contracts are a very good formalized interface for production data pipelines. But if you think about the problem they're solving, and I think a lot of the stuff that resonates in the conversation around data contracts right now is really just friction that exists in data teams. And there are things beyond just data contracts that can help with that, like setting a joint vision of like, hey, doesn't really matter what the interface is. We need to figure out jointly between me and a data engineer and an analyst, like how many customers we have. I don't care what the API interface is in the middle. We need to know how many customers we have. So like setting a joint vision is one way of addressing it. Open communication. Like you could probably, if you have a small enough team or small enough number of stakeholders, you could probably remove a data contract and just replace it with weekly meetings between data producers and data consumers. And it's similar. It's teamwork. So I think with any teamwork, there's communication, there's process, and there's tools. There's probably other stuff. So I think about it as one of the tools in the tool chest. Is that what it's called? Toolbox. Yeah. One of the tools. I fix up houses too, which is sad. I should know it's a toolbox. But that's how I think about data contracts. It's a tool in the tool chest, the toolbox of teamwork as a data function. Right. And I think that's going to be a lot more complicated going forward because people are going to realize they can't just carve themselves out into a box and say, all I do is this, because teams are shrinking. It means people have to take on more responsibility. It means the teamwork dynamics are going to shift. And I think the interfaces and tools have to change accordingly. So I think we're going to see a lot of change here. I think it's going to cause a lot of pain and a lot of friction. And my biggest recommendation is just be open to using as many tools as you can to accomplish things as a team.
So this is my big advice when it comes to data contracts. Data producers, data teams should know that there is already a contract. It's just implicit and no one's talking about it. And if it's implicit, it means the consumer is making the contract. So as a data team, and we put this under the bucket of data producers because they're the ones serving the data to the business as pipelines. So, you need to be proactive. You need to evangelize the role of data contracts in your business so you can say what's technically possible with the resources you have, because it's possible that the SLAs and the expectations that the consumers, and by consumers I mean the business users of the data, and ultimately the business users of the data in many cases are the ones advocating the budget. They're the one pulling in the enterprise architects. They're the ones who are making the actual big purchases, and then the producers are the ones that actually take over those investments and build them out, take the products and build the pipelines. So the producers have to basically take what's sitting in front of them, the tooling they have, the budget they have, the amount of cloud capacity they have, all that stuff, and based on that, make the contract based on what's possible. Because otherwise, you're gonna have consumers who are saying, "Oh, well, we thought we were gonna get real-time data." Well, the producer can say, "We don't have a streaming tool." The consumer can say, like, "Hey, we want data mesh, we want this and that," and the producer have to say, "Okay, well, we don't have the governance or the federation or whatever layers that are required to actually build what you're looking for." So this is my take on data contracts. I think ultimately, I think it is a useful mental model and organizational alignment framework that data teams should really try to advocate. I think everyone's talked about data contracts. They now have our views. Do you have any last thoughts on that one before we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. So this is going to be a hot topic. So we obviously know there's been a ton of momentum for data startups, the data industry in general over the last 5-6 years. Matt Turk's Mad Data Landscape. When you look at that, that's a popular one. It's just so many startups in there now that you need a magnifying glass to look at it at this point. So he did actually add zoom functionality to the Mad Landscape on his website, which is a good feature. But do we think that data companies are overcapitalized?
Yes. So here's my take on what's going on right now. And sorry to talk about this because it's so new, and luckily it seems like everything's kind of okay, but we'll see. Is Silicon Valley Bank last week? What happened? Like, to the best of my knowledge, the company was fine. Like, it was run efficiently, like, great team, awesome partner for startups and venture funds. Problem is risk management. And risk isn't just like, did you do the right or the wrong thing? It is, what do you believe the future is going to look like? And I think 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, everyone believed the future would include low interest rates for an extended period of time. When you make a bet that the future will include low interest rates, you can assume that valuations will be quite high and they will remain quite high. And therefore, you can afford to staff up and hire and take on more money because at some point you'll be able to get that money back in a public market or through an acquisition at a high multiple because rates are so low. So I think what we were seeing was a lot of traction. Traction's the wrong word, is my take on this, is we were seeing a lot of noise and a lot of capital being pushed into data, but also into the tech world and as a whole. Because rates were so low, you could justify high valuations, super crazy high valuations. Some might not have been justified, but you could do it because rates were zero, effectively, or very, very close to zero. Today, that's changed. And nothing else, like ignoring everything else, when rates go up, like multiples and valuations go down, and they go down pretty fast. So I think what's happening today is a lot of startups, as well as banks and everyone else, kind of were under the assumption that the future was low interest rates, high valuations, whereas that's not the future we live in today. And I think it's going to lead to, we still have great technologies out there. We still have great products and great business teams, but I think kind of like what we're seeing with SVB, it's cap tables might be a little skewed right now. They might not be set up in a way in which common stock is worth anything or employee equity is worth anything, or the investors are going to get a great return like they would have hoped to keep doubling down on an investment because it's going to become a $10 billion company. That company that a year ago that they thought would become a $10 billion enterprise might now only have a trajectory to get to $500 million in value. So that changes everything. Are the companies fundamentally flawed? A lot of them are not. A lot of the cap tables, I think, is where a lot of the interesting things are going to take place in my mind in the tech world and in the data world, because your investors get their money back first. That's how a lot of this stuff works. It's convertible notes. If they put in $100 million and you sell for $99 million, they're going to get all $99 million of your business. So like, I think we're going to see not reallocation, but I think one of the biggest things that's going to be negotiated and thought about going forward is, okay, great, people are going to realize they are overcapitalized, that their cap table does not make sense to incentivize employees, founders, investors to really keep doubling down. And it puts people have to sit down at the table and be like, how do we set this up? How do we reset everyone's expectations? Because a lot of the expectations that were set last year will not be met, is my take.
Yeah, and Ethan, I'm not sophisticated enough on that particular topic to debate you on capitalization and markets. I know you have a bit of a New York Goldman Sachs type of background. I've always been a Silicon Valley computer science guy. You have both, obviously, but so I can't debate you on whether data companies are overcapitalized or not. But my question for you is, okay, let's just take that argument and say, let's assume that data companies are overcapitalized. What does that mean for the data practitioner?
I think a fewfold. I think there's two things pushing down on a data practitioner. And let's instead of calling a practitioner, I'm just going to pick a title. Let's say it's the data analyst. So like the data analyst at a small company, you effectively do everything analytics related.
Sure.
There's two things that are taking place. Data companies are not the only ones overcapitalized. So the thing that you really care about is, you don't care about your vendors, you care about your job. So a lot of companies are going through the same thing. There are e-commerce companies that are also overcapitalized. And they're looking at their company being like, okay, great, can we cut back on Facebook spend? Then it's like, okay, great, we have to cut back here. Then it's like, okay, great, we might need to downsize our data team. So it's like, I think that's the first thing that's going to hit data practitioners. They are not going to care about the vendors. They're going to care about their job first and foremost. Second, and that it's the same dynamics at play. Higher interest rates, valuations and expectations go down. Like phenomenal companies, like Stripe having layoffs, like they're a phenomenal business, but expectations are being reset. So that's the most direct part. In terms of vendors, I think we're going to see a lot of business models that people thought would work in 2021 and 2022. A lot of like very long-term R&D, like more focused on GitHub stars than revenue, more focused on Slack community membership than customers. I think people are going to get impatient, and I think you're going to see a lot less free stuff for the world and a lot more vendors out there competing with each other to try and take more revenue, or starting to find a way of being like, I charged you $100 a month last year. Can I charge you 140, maybe 200? So I think what you're going to start seeing is more competition for dollars, because these companies' expectations are being reset, but like they still have to grow. And I think people are going to become impatient because they're not going to be like, an investor's not going to sit down with a company that's a unicorn and be like, let's reset everyone's expectations. And by the way, go keep focusing on free stuff for the next 3 years. Like you can't write off $100 million investment in a company and not expect it to start generating revenue fast. You can only make so many, you only have so much time. So I think the two dynamics at play for data practitioners, number one, their own job. That's the top priority for everyone. The second one is, it's not prices are going to go up holistically, but I think we're going to pretty rapidly figure it out in the next 18 months, figure out which products in the data world people will pay for and which ones they won't. And I think the ones that people will not pay for are going to have a lot of problems. And I think the ones that people will pay for, we're going to pretty rapidly figure out kind of what those price points are, because vendors are going to be trying to figure out what that price point is with their customers, because they have to. They need the revenue to justify or to try and justify the valuations they were at last year.
So, okay, so I'm a data analyst, I'm a data engineer. I'm hearing anecdotally rumors that data companies are overcapitalized. That makes me want to, evaluate the vendors that I have and really go back to which ones are creating the most like business value, right? So, which one is actually helping me move the needle when I communicate to my boss or my boss is, communicating to the executive level, what we're doing with data and how it's serving the business, you want to be able to say, which vendors are helping you the most, which ones are probably maybe superfluous, or you're talking about, hey, companies consolidating, but
Yep.
teams can consolidate their own data stacks, right?
Totally.
I mean,
Yep.
they can find a way to, rather than having a few specialized tools, they can have more, end to end tools.
Yep.
Or, if it's just like a tool that's being used for like a fringe use case, those are the ones that you're going to want to kind of evaluate. But I think this is a good segue into our last topic, which is biggest predictions for 2023.
Totally. You want to kick this one off?
Yeah, sure. So I brought this up before, but I would say taking these data pipelines, these projects, lots of data being accumulated in the cloud now. Everyone has tons of raw staging models where data is being loaded in. But it's probably 10 to 15% coverage of how much of that data is actually being used for operational use cases. And when I say operational use cases, it actually ties back to that business's customer base, how they're making revenue, either back end operations or customer facing operations. Like maybe you have some data driven workflows that are communicating with your customers, or part of the revenue flow. So I think it's time for more coverage of the amount of data you're accumulating to be pulled into the operational side of the house, meaning that you are really using it for your business use cases. Less of an emphasis on ad hoc reporting. And that also is going to bring in like an element of consolidation, because you're going to pick the data products and platforms you're using, the ones that are really going to move the needle the most in terms of pulling it into the operational side of the business.
The
I'd love
other,
to hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
so before I go to my prediction, the interesting thing there is when I talk about data, there's three ways to create value from data. One, analytics. It's dashboards, insights, things to make better strategic decisions. That's where a lot of data teams start. Second one is operations, what you just talked about. Streamline a manual task. Third one is build products that people pay money for. That's blurs the line between data teams and product teams. And then the fourth one, it's not how you create value, but it's like risk mitigation, security, privacy, data ethics, et cetera. In that second bucket, what you're talking about here, where we start blurring the line between analytics and operations, which I do believe will start happening, especially with visualization tools that are mixed with CRUD platforms like Retool. I think those lines start to blur. But the one thing to note there when you talk about consolidation is it's not just tools. In a lot of companies, those are two fundamentally, if not more, fundamentally different teams of people. A lot of companies, like when I was at LiveRamp, I was the head of business intelligence. My job was build dashboards and analytics. We had a different team whose full-time job was operations and automation. They used different tools and different pipelines and different everything to connect our CRM system to our HR system to our billing system. And I think I believe over time these will converge, and I believe we'll have one data team that does everything, using different tools for different things, sometimes being able to collapse them. But I think there will be an interesting team dynamic there as well, where someone whose full-time job used to be connect systems is now sitting next to an analyst who's saying, hey, can we reverse ETL that data or just stream it directly from the source? And I think you're going to have these people that have different OKRs, different KPIs, one of which is build dashboards and one of which is automate workflows, sitting down trying to collaborate and think about being a team like we were talking about with data contracts. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic as they do consolidate, but I agree that those will be consolidating.
Yeah, I think that this is really going to be I think Juan Cicada from Data.World calls it the show me the money year for data. So shout out to Juan for that line. But ultimately, I think it's true across the board, right? When you talk about consolidation, and I think that we're also seeing more of the data platforms that were more focused before starting to spread their wings and start to overlap with other, even partners, right? So we're
Totally.
seeing some competition.
Yeah, this is so. If I had to make a bet in 2020, maybe it's too late. Maybe it's already happening, and this doesn't sound exciting. But I think a lot of the people that partnered to get where they are today, these multi-billion-dollar, tens of billions of dollars worth of companies like Snowflake, Fivetran, and DBT, are not going to be as friendly as they were before. Maybe this is a spicy take on the market, but even as recent as today, Snowflake announced they have a native ServiceNow integration into Snowflake. They already have a Salesforce integration. I posted a few weeks ago predicting that Snowflake was going to have, and you might know more about this than I do, native like change data capture capabilities for certain types of data sources. And someone at Snowflake responded saying they already have something in that realm. I don't think it's quite the same, but so I think that dynamic's going to be very interesting to watch. The data warehouses, specifically Snowflake, relative to Fivetran when it comes to the ELT world. Because if someone's paying $100,000 to Snowflake and $100,000 to Fivetran, if you're Fivetran, are you going to build a data warehouse? That's quite difficult. If you're Snowflake, are you going to build a ServiceNow connector to try and take $10,000 of that $100,000? Like, they're doing it. So that's one thing. I think you're seeing a very similar dynamic right now between Fivetran and DBT, where Fivetran is offering DBT core transformations inside of Fivetran. And again, it's one of those things where, is it super straightforward for someone like DBT to build Fivetran? Not necessarily, but if Fivetran wants to use DBT core, it's open source. So they're able to do that. So and if you rewind back 3 years ago, 5 years ago, those companies were three of the closest partners in the ecosystem. And I don't think those partnerships are gone. But I think going back to what's going on in the financial market, people have to make money. And they have to make moves that will allow them to make money as quickly as possible. And I think it's going to lead to a really interesting, I think at the biggest companies, we're going to see more conflict. We're going to see more things where people start stepping on each other's toes. And then I think you're going to see a lot of the smaller companies starting to ink partnerships to compete with those bigger platforms, trying to do it all on their own. Because if it's, hey, you could do everything natively in one platform, but it's not as good as for small companies that are seamlessly working together with newer technology. I think that's my biggest prediction. I think it's not just those three companies, but I think a lot of the bigger companies are going to pretty rapidly expand scope, either through merger, like M&A, through in-house development, or through just, yeah. So that's my take is we're going to see more conflict than we've seen in the past. Up until now, everyone's been perfect friends. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I think it has to change.
Well, we're all going to see it play out. So it should be yet another exciting year in data for us. Ethan, always great to have you on the show.
Always great to be here.
Yeah, Ethan Aaron, CEO of Portable.io. This week, at the time of recording, hosting the Low Key Data Conference. Link to the conference will be in the description of this pod. It'll be live, but also available on demand for watch later. Lots of great data experts in the industry, data leaders with Fortune 500 companies going to speak and share their expert insights there. So, Ethan, that's going to be super exciting.
Totally. We're definitely looking forward to it. March 22nd, 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Free to sign up. Go to portable.io. I know you're going to drop the registration link as well, but super excited for people to attend. Thanks for having me.
Not to mention that it's free. That's another great aspect. Just of the communal sharing of expert insights is just another great thing that you're bringing to the table, Ethan. And I also recommend everyone follow Ethan Aaron on LinkedIn as well if you want more of his takes on the industry. Well, thank you, Ethan. We'll definitely be in touch.
Totally. Talk soon, Jeff.